So, kia ora koto, ko Stephen toku ingoa no o tatahi ao. It's great to see you all there. And what we're going to be doing today is having some brainstorming, a bit of an update about where we're up to with the letter. And also I've asked for some people to give us some sector updates, just so we always hear different perspectives, because we kind of, well, we're within our bubbles, aren't we? We know what we know, and it's good to hear other people and what they're going through. So thanks for joining, and I think we'll just get underway. I've asked two people to speak just at the start of our meeting, and then after that, I think what we'll probably do is have a little update on the letter that's been sent. And then I thought it would be great to get our collective brains together and thinking about where we're at and is there opportunity here? What does it mean for the future? All those big picture questions, because I know for each of you, you're facing different things within your own organizations. So it would be great to kind of pull together our own thoughts, share what we're seeing and finding, and be able to learn from each other. So I think what we'll do, depending how many people join, we'll probably send you into different breakout rooms, because I think that's a really effective way to communicate and everybody gets a chance to speak that way. Whereas a big room like this, there's too many people to speak. So that's the plan. And then, as we've done before, if one person from the group can take notes and send them to me, then I'm able to circulate those afterwards. And I've had a number of people say they can't make the meeting today, but they're really keen to stay up to speed with what's being discussed and what perspectives are being shared. So that's really all I have in mind. Pretty simple agenda, really. So to start with, I'm just wondering if Shane Whitfield is able to share with us. Shane comes from DIA, and he's at the Office of Ethnic Communities. So I just thought it would be good to have a different perspective and hear what he had to say. And yeah, I see somebody in the chat. You're able to chat and message and send links and stuff to each other. But Shane, do you mind giving us an update?
Kia ora koutou. So I'm Shane Whitfield. I'm Regional Manager for Community Engagement in the Southern region, so South Island, Christchurch based. We have two other regional managers, one based in Wellington, one based in Auckland. We cover the whole country in terms of provision of advice, policy development and so forth for ethnic communities across the country. So when we talk about ethnic communities, we are referring to Middle Eastern, African, Asian, continental Europe. And we are referring to newcomers, people who have recently come to the country. We're talking about refugees, and we're talking about people who have been in New Zealand for some time, so second, third, fourth generation peoples. In terms of population-wise, our mandated communities make up about 800,000 people. So I think that's about 16 or 17% of the population. So it's a significant population group. We're also, while we tend to talk about ethnicity as our piece of the world, we are heavily involved in the faith and interfaith space as well. Let me just open up my notes so I remember what I was going to talk about. The kind of main goals of the office. So we are a business function, a business group within the Department of Internal Affairs. So we have a director, we are a directorate within that. The vision of the office is around flourishing ethnic diversity, thriving New Zealand. And we have some particular purpose areas, which I've included in an email for Stephen to pass on to everyone. In terms of COVID-19 response, so a key focus for us has very much been around translation of advice, taking an all of government approach to that. So helping communities, particularly those where English is a second, third, fourth language for them, making sure that information is accessible, making sure that it's relevant to their particular needs, and getting it out across as many networks as we can. So in the email that I'll share with everyone, we've got a link to some of our key translated advice. We've primarily focused on videos, so translation of key information and spoken verbally through fluent language speakers. We've used our own staff, so we have around 50 staff across the country, and we speak about 28 different languages. So we're focused primarily on getting staff on camera and sharing those messages, but we're also very pleased to be able to work with a number of community members who have been very kind and donated their time and faces to do some videos for us. So I'll share the link to that, and please do feel free to share it as broadly as you like. Second key thing we've been working on in terms of COVID response has been the reprioritisation of our development fund. So we have a $4.2 million ethnic communities development fund specifically dedicated to supporting those communities in a range of different things. We've reprioritised the remainder of that fund, so about $2 million towards recovery from COVID-19. So in particular, we are prioritising it around alternative means for our communities to stay connected, so digital space, other kinds of ways in which we can promote social cohesion. Our second priority is looking at community employment. So we know that, like most of New Zealand, employment is going to be a real challenge moving forward. So we're putting some of our funding towards any kind of initiatives that work for our particular communities, and also resilience and recovery. So starting to think about, as we transition out through the alert levels over the coming months, what that will look like, and what kind of innovations can come from our community to recover, I suppose. We've had quite a bit to do with providing policy advice. So the office is the primary mechanism, I guess, for central government to access information and understand the unique needs of our particular communities. So we provide quite a bit of policy guidance across various departments. Currently, we've been working quite closely with MB and with MSD, making sure that some of the things that they are putting in place are able to meet those unique needs. We are the leader of the Ethnic Communities Workstream within the National Welfare Coordination Group. So there's a whole workstream dedicated to welfare across a range of population groups. It includes Māori and Pacifica, includes disability sector, rural sector. There's a range of particular groups, and OEC is taking a lead with the Ethnic Communities Workstream. Within that workstream, we also have Red Cross, Immigration New Zealand, Police, and the Human Rights Commission. HRC have become particularly involved as we've noticed quite an upward trend in xenophobia and racism, and we expect that's actually going to increase as we drop down through the alert levels, as the new norm, the new reality becomes a bit more clear. What we've seen in other jurisdictions has been when unemployment rises, when financial pressures are put in, additional financial pressures are put on households, it often brings out unhelpful behaviour, and that can be in a range of ways. So we're really looking closely at how we can support HRC with some of their messaging around racism, xenophobia, those kinds of things. I guess the last key thing I wanted to talk about was our regional connections to the Civil Defence Emergency Management Groups, or the CDEMs. So there's about 20 of those around the country, and we are connected to most of those, providing an ethnic community perspective on recovery, how they can manage the emergency situation that we're currently all going through. That was kind of my spiel.
Great. No, that's really helpful. Thank you. And the numbers that you're talking about, it's quite amazing, really. You know, 800,000 people. I hadn't really thought through the exact numbers there, but that's huge. Andrew Phillips at Charities Services, I just want to prep you just in case you had any other contributions. But does anybody have any questions about that side of things and ethnic communities? That's cool. What we'll do is in the email, we'll put the summary that you've sent me with the links. And I think probably a lot of people will have cross connections with things that they're involved in. So it's quite helpful just to be aware of what's going on and the response. So yeah, I really appreciate your sharing. And Andrew Phillips from Charities Services, did you want to give any brief update on how things are traveling at your end?
Sure, very, very happy. I mean, I haven't really prepared anything in particular for today. We've been really, I mean, I'm absolutely aware a lot of people have been kind of feeding questions through to me to be providing to MSD, MB and IRD about the wage subsidy, and we got some answers in relation to how big churches should apply. And I'm happy to share that. I know that I provided to Stephen and Peter, and so they could disseminate it through their networks, but absolutely happy to share that further. The bigger questions around how charities should use reserves when they're essentially taking mitigation measures remains a question, and I pose this to them, and I'm trying to get some certainty around that and some guidance. I think they're just a little bit nervous about providing general guidance, realizing that it's going to be individual for every charity. But if and when that comes through, I'm very happy to share that with the group. From Charities Services perspective, otherwise, we're really working hard on trying to figure out how to deliver remote kind of engagement. I know there's a lot of webinars and Zoom meetings happening at the moment, and Zoom fatigue is a very real thing. I'm sure we're all feeling it. So we don't want to get in the way of that, or be sending we want to survey people and get information in, but we don't want to do that too much because I know a lot of people are doing it. So trying to do it in a coordinated way with the rest of government and integrating in with what they're doing is something we're really prioritizing. There is some of you may have seen that the MB have released a cabinet paper where they're looking to change the law to mean that basically charities that have to breach their rules to meet COVID requirements, for example, by not holding an AGM on a particular time, that will be made legal, essentially. So to just provide some reassurance there, I know both MB and us have said that this is not something that we will be concerned with, and we encourage entities to obviously be obeying the lockdown. That is the priority, but just so everyone's aware, that is in train. With it's only a cabinet paper at the moment, but MB have released it, and they'll be looking to change the law reasonably quickly as soon as I guess Parliament can assemble and make those things happen. So that's me. Hand it back to you, Steve.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's just good to hear these different perspectives and know sort of what's going on in different places. The last person I asked to just give a quick update from their perspective is James Lord from B Collective, and I got an email that was basically talking about volunteering, and just thought some of the ideas and things that they were looking at were quite interesting, and it will be a good way to stimulate our discussion before we go into the breakouts. So James, I think you're on the call. Do you mind just giving a really brief update on what you're up to?
Sure. So yeah, kia ora tātou, everyone. Lovely to be here and great to see so many familiar names on this call. So just by way of context, so B Collective is an international social enterprise based here in New Zealand, Australia and the UK. We have a digital social infrastructure, or a platform if you like, that connects different elements of the economy to be able to share volunteer workforce and effort in a collective way, so that the entire system can work together in a way to achieve lasting social change. So a lot of our work has been obviously engaging with local community groups and NGOs, both here in New Zealand and overseas. One of the benefits of being an international group is that it's quite interesting to see the differences in our various approaches. In New Zealand, I think it's fair to say, is in a very different stage to our colleagues in Australia and the UK. Certainly the conversations that we've been having have centred very much around the fact that COVID-19, the pandemic, has brought to light and reinforced things that the voluntary sector have been saying for a long time, but what was an inconvenience before is now a critical challenge. So older volunteers who are now no longer available, the need to be able to connect in meaningful ways with other groups, to be able to share a volunteer workforce resource, and even other resources where needed. So the questions that we're really posing, I suppose, is very much how do we better utilise the skills and experience, whether that's paid or unpaid, that is available across not only the charitable sector, but also across business, sporting groups, tertiary education, maybe even secondary education, so that we're able to increase the pool of those people who, beyond those that have traditionally volunteered. And also looking at, what is this new approach that's going to be needed, not just to backfill the volunteers that have now left the workforce, but also to replace the staff that are no longer able to be employed by the charitable sector because of the funding squeeze that is in the sector. So how can we utilise skilled volunteers to be able to meet that shortfall, particularly in the short term, because obviously long term we're hoping that the sector will be able to recover in such a way that we'll be able to look at re-employing the people that we need. So I guess the fundamental question that we're trying to pose is how do we get that very pragmatic, practical collaboration across the entire economy in a real systematic and practical way. We are getting a lot of support over in Australia and the UK with the work that we're doing. There's a particular campaign called Play for Lives in Australia, which is basically all about taking the sports people who are no longer able to play sport and repurpose that time that they would have spent playing and training, and instead work with various community groups that are now needing to source new volunteers. In the UK, we've got, in Northern Ireland in particular, Volunteer Now, which is the large peak body for all of volunteering in the UK, is working with the largest business peak body over there, and they're connecting together so that they're able to share both the volunteer and paid staff that they have on their books to be able to better collaborate. So I think it would be wonderful to be able to see in New Zealand a continuation of that, because one thing that has become very apparent with the increase in the number of these groups that have emerged, people who want to provide their services and contribute, how do we pull all of that together so that we're able to address the things that charities are very much saying they need help with. And I'll provide a little bit of an email for Stephen to be able to send out with those sort of questions, those prompting questions, and hopefully be able to continue that conversation.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And I think it helps us get in the mindset of the next part of the call, which what I'm proposing to do is send us into breakout rooms. I'm really keen that this forum is a place where everyone can express themselves and have a chance to listen to other perspectives as well. And we can't really do it. I'm just looking, I think there's 31 or so people on the call. So what I'm going to do is send you off to 5 different rooms, I think. And that way there will be a chance for you to share your perspective and have some brainstorming. If we can, I'd like to keep it focused on the future and thinking about what does it mean for your organizations where we're at now, but also how can we help be proactive, be positive, and provide guidance and other information to people who are affected, particularly charities and not-for-profits and NGOs. And I think, as I said in that email, sending out the info about the call, we're kind of at this crossroads of the past and the future colliding. And so how can we be thought leaders? How can we bring something to the table that actually contributes? So that's the purpose of the next little part of the call. I'm going to send you away for like 15 minutes. It's going to go by faster than you realize. 15 minutes sounds like a long time, but it will be done before it goes by really quick. So if you could just really briefly introduce yourselves to each other. Keep it really brief, but then just start thinking, how can we work proactively for the future? And what does it mean? And just as an example that I put in the email, some charities or not-for-profits are experiencing a huge downturn, whereas others I've talked to, they're just incredibly busy and they need more people. So how can we align or help those who need the support to draw on people who have experienced volunteers or staff or whatever and realign a little bit? I also forgot, just before I send you away to the rooms, the letter to the Prime Minister, it did get sent, and it's now been read, I understand, and it's being actioned, or at least a response is being prepared, so that I'll definitely send it to all of you when I get it. I got called by that Stuff reporter, so gave a few comments for an article that hopefully helps to shine a little bit more light on the sector. I would have preferred the article to have a bit more about the vital role that these organizations play, but you know, that's fine. It's better than not having something said. Yeah, so I'll definitely keep you updated as I find out more or hear more. But the other thing is, if you need to drop off the call, that's completely fine too. I'm recording this, so I'll upload it and then you can watch it later. But I'll send you to the breakout rooms, and then if one of you could take the responsibility to type up what you talked about and report back, that's really helpful, and then email it to me, and then I can make sure that the other people receive all the information, because there's more than 120 people on the email list, and many of them will be interested to see what it is that we talked about, because it might be relevant for their situation. So I'm just going to send you, I think 5 rooms would be good, because it's not too many, and hopefully there'll be enough, small enough so you can chat. All right. So you need to hit join when you get the message. Thank you. Yeah, I know I'm sure that there could have been many long what Sometimes I find, though, by forcing the time frame, it means you have to say the key things. So, what we've done, hopefully, is gotten some ideas from these different rooms. And what I'd love is if a representative can report back now, because it'll be interesting to see if there's themes which come across through what you discussed. And also, I'm really keen that this group becomes a positive, proactive voice. And if we can come up with solutions or come up with ideas that can help the sector, then I think that would be really great. So does one of you want to kick off, and we can work through the groups?
I'm happy to start. That's okay. I was taking some notes during our session, but obviously anyone from our group can join in, so I might not have got everything captured. But my name's Lisa Foster, and I'm the Chief Executive for Rare Disorders New Zealand. So we look at people who fall between the gaps sometimes when it comes to gaining health and social support, and work with advocacy around that, and very busy at the moment. But the discussion we were having was the opportunity that currently is presented, and talking about third sector organisations, so the non-welfare sector, and looking at it through the eyes of the treaty framework, and how this is an opportunity to hold the big picture together. And some concerns that came up were around losing some of the smaller charities within that group. And if 90% of these groups have no paid staff, that's a big risk at the moment. So thinking that the funding's dropped and they would have some access needs, you know, how can we help to prevent the smaller charities doing really important work from disappearing? And improving digital literacy, so the equity in access. So there may be a household that has access to a computer. There may be lots of places where this isn't possible, or they're sharing it, or there's an issue around stress within that household which prevents open access, and lots of other variables in between. So we were looking at, you know, the potential for a local connection, helping each other more on that social side of things, to have a locally led support or an informal network of people helping to make sure that, again, those people without access to digital technology are still going to get the help they need. Yeah, I think that kind of is most of what we were talking about. I think really it's the opportunity to have the conversations, collect all the voices together and do things differently. going above the parapet and thinking outside the box.
That's good. Thank you. It's a good summary. Does anybody else want to share from that group, or we'll move to the next group?
I can share. Perhaps I took the notes for our group. Hi, I'm Liz Davies from General Manager of Social Link. Got lots of information. I'll try and summarise. Community Waikato have set up a fantastic website called Here to Help You. So that's to link individuals needing help with their providers. And there's a centralised kitchen providing lots of meals. This is all in Hamilton. From Social Link side, we're interested in looking at talking to government about how gaming trust funding can be replaced, given that's all on hold, and what advocacy could be done on that. And also wondered whether it would be worth sending the letter to the PM to our local MPs as well, just to get it out there. Community Waitakere have created a fantastic mapping, Google Maps of neighbourhood support groups, community emergency response groups and neighbourhood support. So that was a great resource, and they're also wondering whether the NGO sector can help with the processing of applications through MSD. Community Networks Aotearoa talked about NEMA and some big issues about civil defence not communicating necessarily very well with their communities. And they're seeing big issues around food, particularly for the elderly, single parents and so on. And they are setting up an advisory group regarding service delivery. We talked about the fact that there's a lot of information out there, but it's not particularly coordinated into one site. Craig is working with some groups who are doing scenario planning for the future, which sounded like a great resource that could be shared. And Kate from Charities also talked about looking at how they can increase their digital engagement and centralise a centralised place for resources. So I hope that's a okay summary of members of my group.
Sounded good. And if you can include links, if you know them, to any of the things that you mentioned, I'll put that in the email out afterwards.
Okay, I'll send you the notes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that'd be really good. I think part of it is just sharing and knowing what's out there, and so yeah, it's good to hear about those initiatives.
Brothers and sisters, peace be with you. My name is Steve Davis. I'm sharing about the ministry that I've been strongly involved with the last.
All right, do we want to have the next group?
I'm happy to speak. So Catherine and my group. So I'm going to try and put ours sort of into themes. We also spoke about the gaming funds falling over and the impact on organizations, and not impacting the organizations, the questions of the people those organizations are actually serving due to the gaming addictions and other issues there. So question of, as organizations fall over, what will the process be with government gaining a better appreciation of just what the sector is doing and the cost being saved by government. There also was some discussion about collaboration because of the challenge as organizations tighten their belt. How do they find, continue to deliver their services? So what are the critical skill sets they need, and how do they increase that volunteer capacity to deliver it? So we had Aimee from Christians Against Poverty noting that in the future, they anticipate a lot more people being in difficult financial straits and needing skilled help to help them manage budget, get out of credit debt, and that type of thing. So we were glad to have heard about James' organization and the opportunity that provided. And then churches also facing the challenge of elderly populations who may not be as digitally savvy, and how do you either force do you force a digital savviness into the organization and the congregation, Or do you develop a strategy that looks at other avenues such as the telephone or other ways to reach out? So group, I hope I represented that. Any input from my group before we move on?
Okay, I can go next. Dennis Parker. In our group, we had a very good discussion. We actually had a dive into one topic only, volunteering. So hopefully we've got something of substance to report back on that topic. James, in his group, James Lord, he said that recently there's been a group before the pandemic where they asked the question, what would happen if volunteers disappeared? And now we have that as a reality, that volunteers will be disappearing, a lot to do with because many of them are older and health is a major concern. So but also what we see coming out of the pandemic will be an increase in the need for services. And so there is going to be a higher need for volunteering and probably in quite different areas. Andrew talked about some of the current trends of episodic volunteering, where people are volunteering when they can, but that doesn't actually meet the need of organisations, and so we need to bridge something that's going to be quite different. Jen talked about 3 different groups of she sees of volunteers, being young people who are not consistent, parents more focused on not-for-profits to do with schools and sports, and older people. Well, she actually didn't say older people. She said more traditional, who happen to have a profile of being older. And this is going to cause lots of problems. In my own life, I'm a director of trade aid. We have 600 people involved with our organisation, of which more than 90% are volunteers. And it'd be fair to say that the majority of them are in the older age group. So we see this as going to be a major issue of how we're going to engender volunteering in the future. Valerie talked about the work in building a consensus community, and in doing so, we really don't know what things are going to look like in the future. And there's another one of my organisations. I'm a chair of a Cycling Canterbury, which is a competitive sports group. We have members, school kids, volunteers. Probably 800 people are involved, and the future of how we're going to deliver those services probably will be the same for all sporting groups throughout New Zealand. So this is a major challenge, and we would like to tackle the volunteering side of things. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think was there one more group, or was that it?
Next. So our group talked about a few things. We felt like we needed more time too. So with the Arthritis Foundation, they are saying that they're not quite an essential service, or as essential as they thought they were. Their helpline is very quiet, but people are, there's lots of activity on their Facebook and their website. And Diane was kind of saying that people are parking health issues at the moment and kind of just dealing with being on lockdown, you know, getting food, doing the basics. And so they're not worried about their arthritis right now. Liz is doing a lot of collaboration with funders in Christchurch, lots of Zoom meetings and sharing of information, and the main concerns are wage subsidies and employment. But it's positive to be working together. And all of us kind of had a lot of concerns about volunteers doing paid staff roles. Civil defence is very quiet, and there's lots of variations for all the groups and challenges to connect with people. Chris, who's involved in housing, said of course they're busier than ever, but they've been very proactive in linking people up and working with MSD to get people into homes. But there's not really a plan as yet what's going to happen on the other side when those people don't need to be in motels. There's a huge increased volume of work, and there's concern about staff burnout. And the longer term plan for homelessness. But they're working with the government and maybe looking at extending contracts for motels and looking at other alternatives. He was saying that in Queenstown, rent has dropped by 20% already. So for their members, rent freezes and subsidies are an issue for them. Yeah, we would have liked a bit longer for the next question, but Chris is going to cover that up. Basically, we talked about we didn't really need to reinvent the wheel, that there is a lot of collaborative stuff already
one of the things we discussed was, and a few of us on the call are also on this National Welfare Coordinating Group with NEMA, and just their lack of an understanding of what community groups are actually doing out in the field right now. And so I think, Mark, the work that Community Waitakere is doing around this mapping is of great interest, because just from what we're seeing and hearing on these calls, that they don't have that understanding of the reach into community and the services that are already being provided. And I think it's an opportunity for the sector to help government in that area, so that they don't hear about a problem someplace and assume they've got to come in and step in nationally to do some things. So that's the idea there.
That's great. Thank you. I think that was all the groups, right? Everyone had a chance to speak. Well, I hear you that we could have more time. I mean, if people want to stick around and they're interested, then maybe what we can do is keep the call open for a bit longer, and whoever wants to can stay and continue discussions. What I'm hoping is that I'll get a summary from each of those groups, and then I'll put all of that information in the email. And that way the people who aren't on the call can benefit from the things that were discussed. And if there's any links we can share, etc. One of the things that I'm still keen to understand, because this group itself is kind of evolving, and what role that we can play. What, we've come together as kind of a true cross-sector representation, and what role we can play going forward in terms of continuing to meet, but also being a focal point for providing information for others. So if any of you have feedback on that, I'm always keen to hear. Yeah, so my aim for the call was simple. We would have some sector updates, we'd have some discussions, we'd hear from each other. I think we've kind of achieved that within this hour. So I think what I'd like to do is just have a clear, defined sort of, we're drawing the line that part of the call is done. But I'm also happy to leave this open if other people want to stay, if you feel like it's valuable to keep discussing. If you'd like to have smaller groups, then we can do that. But what I might do is sort of draw a line under the main part of the call. And that way I'll have that part as the bit that was recorded and shared. Does anybody have any other thoughts or anything that anyone wanted to say?
I'd like to say, if anyone wants to continue that kind of wider discussion about volunteering and what that means for you, we'd be happy to do that. You can contact us privately or have whatever you need. Yeah.
No, that's cool.
Stephen, can I ask Craig, or is he just gone? Craig Fisher, if you're still there, he did a good presentation this week, and I just wondered if that had been recorded and was available for people to watch. But has he just...
I am still here. Hi, Yvonne. I understand it was recorded. I haven't seen anything, but I can ask Josie Pagani, who was the leader of that, whether it was. I just highlight I was reasonably brutal and confrontational in some of it.
But it was very useful, Craig, and that's why I just thought other people might want to have a look at it.
Sure, yeah.
Particularly around the wage subsidies and applying for it and who should and shouldn't and so on. I found that really useful. Thank you.
Right, and that's a point that Andrew Phillips and I have been debating and trying to progress, as well as getting a little bit more clarity regarding the wage subsidy. Just very quickly, my main point to the meeting was that everyone is focusing on the 30% income drop when you have to sign off a statutory declaration which says you've also taken steps to mitigate, to reduce costs, to utilise reserves, to access funding lines. And there are a lot of organisations out there that do have a rainy day reserve or some other form of reserve in their balance sheets that have already applied for the wage subsidy. My concern is that we may see an unwinding of this and auditing of it in the future, and claims back against organisations or even in the short term, media picking up on that, because we've seen what media has done to some corporate entities that have claimed, and people's feeling towards that. That's okay in the corporate sector, but in the charity sector, when the media climbs into a charity, it damages a lot more than that individual charity. It damages the trust and confidence in all in the sector. So I do have concerns around that.
Mm.
But in answer to your original question, Yvonne, I will try and get that webinar.
That's great. Thank you, Craig. That's helpful. I might share it, but I did a wage subsidy checklist for organizations before they apply, asking them to actually look at the revenue each of the years and try to calculate, and then actually write down what mitigating steps that they'd taken. So then there was at least a written record of what had been done. I might send it to you as well, Craig, and just share it around, because I think it is an important point.
Thanks,
sure.
Craig.
Welcome. And I think that was one of the points that I made in our group, Stephen, is that there's some fantastic resources being put out there freely by people who have spent a lot of time investing in creating those. I've been really busy sharing them, but I appreciate that I've only been busy sharing the ones that I've been lucky enough to have access to. And we really could do with a bit more coordination, or a library list somewhere of all of the links to these fantastic resources, because there is some brilliant enduring material being created.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And the reason I keep replying all to the emails when I'm telling people about this group is that if you track through, there's a huge amount of resources there already. So if any of you do have resources, feel free to email them, and I'll make sure that they go in the email updates to people. So I think what I'll do is draw a line under this. That the plan is to have another one next week. It might be that it's held on the Thursday rather than Friday, because I'm hosting a unconference on the Friday, which is going to go all afternoon for 300 people on Zoom. So I'll be busy with that, but I'll send some information about that the next call afterwards. So thank you everybody for joining.